electronic system at the moment. Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming in this morning. On that issue of offshore processing of asylum claims, you make it sound like it's sort of a very sort of strange aberration, but it was in fact considered by the EU in 2018, and I believe proposed as well in 2003 by Tony Blair for discussion at European Council. So are there any other countries or states who actually have considered that model?
Well, I certainly don't know of any country that has actually been able to implement it, which I guess sort of also speaks to the fact that aside from what we want to say in terms of its impact on the people who eventually are put through the system, it's clearly not a very easy one to manage. So I think that already, I think it's indicative by itself. Obviously, there are what the European Union had in mind, I understand, was somewhat different from the entire offshoring to a place 5,000 kilometers away. But it was eventually not. The idea that there would be a processing that would be then followed, however, by departure and arrival in the European Union. But even that was not possible. I think my colleague Vincent may have more on this, because North Africa was in fact one of the areas that was being considered for this.
Mr. Cochetel? We can't hear you, sorry. I think the mute might still be on.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Yep. Yeah, in June 2018, we tabled with European countries, and it was discussed at the European Council, the idea of a regional disembarkation mechanism to make sure that, states would understand equally their responsibility in terms of rescue at sea and disembarkation on both sides of the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, the way the European Union communicated the conclusion of the presidency to the North African countries was clearly misunderstood by the North African countries, who thought that Europe was attempting to offshore processing and somehow have an extraterritorial approach to its own responsibility. So in the meantime, we've been working with North African countries to try to capacitate them in terms of rescue at sea, in terms of disembarkation, in terms of post-disembarkation processing, but it's a very slow process. But it can't be, it's done only in North Africa, and it's not done in Southern Europe. So it has to be an equal approach to the same responsibilities.
Okay, so one could conclude then that far from being something that described as negatively towards the UK's character, it's a perfectly sensible solution to consider, though obviously there may be lots of practicalities like you've set out, Ms. Palucci-Law, to make it not viable.
If I may, I believe that we're talking about two different things altogether, in the sense that the notion, at least, that my colleague has described was that there should be some places where the processing would take, essentially where the refugees were, and that there would be the processing followed then by departure towards the countries where there would be requiring asylum. Whereas if you were to sort of take people entirely out of the way to an island, what would you be? You would be taking responsibility for these people. Take them to an island 5,000 kilometers from here, and then. I mean, I think you need to. I think it's important to look at the whole sequence and how the whole procedure would play out. Because what has happened in the case of Australia is that there are people who have been now festering for many years in terrible conditions, as well as I think has been documented by the media and by the doctors working there. There have been several cases of suicide. There have been a very high rate of mental problems, including suicide by children. So I think we are looking at the situation that I would say any government considering it would really have to think about very carefully.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.